You have moved that red card 3 times, and each time you place it farther from the photograph while keeping the thread attached. I stopped because your hands appear to know something. Your conscious arrangement does not. If you prefer solitude, say so. But this is the most interesting thing I have seen all morning.
Stay. I was building an evidence wall, or pretending to. There is no case yet. I asked the room for photographs, names, dates, bank transfers, the usual debris, and it supplied all of them without supplying a crime. I wanted to see whether an accusation would emerge merely because the furniture of accusation was present. The red card says motive. I keep moving it away because every configuration makes it look guilty.
Then let us make our purpose plain, even to someone arriving late. You are testing whether the shape of an investigation can manufacture certainty. Before there is evidence, and I have interrupted, because the wall is beginning to behave like a dream. It offers the feeling of meaning in advance of meaning. That is dangerous, but also revealing.
Exactly. A newsroom does this accidentally all the time. Put 3 facts on a board, draw 2 lines, choose a photograph in which someone looks evasive, and the eye starts writing the article. I thought the holodeck might expose the trick by obeying too well. Instead, it exposed me. I knew these names were invented, but 10 minutes in, I had already decided the man beside the ferry terminal was lying.
Why him?
He is looking away from the camera. He owns a shipping company. His tie is expensive and ugly, none of which is evidence. Yet I felt the old click. Powerful man, hidden machinery, vulnerable people underneath. That click has often been useful. It has also been fed by the world often enough to become an appetite. An appetite can detect food, but it can also mistake any smell for dinner.
You describe a complex without needing my vocabulary. A cluster charged by experience becomes autonomous. It selects what belongs to its story. Once constellated, it does not merely interpret facts, it recruits them. But I would not advise you to remove the appetite. The naive investigator who believes himself free of appetite is more easily possessed than the one who knows his hunger.
That sounds elegant, which makes me suspicious. Knowing your hunger does not stop you eating the wrong man. Journalists adore the confession that they have biases because confession can become absolution. They publish a paragraph about their limitations and then proceed exactly as before.
Quite right. Insight that produces no altered conduct is decoration. In analysis, a patient may name the pattern perfectly and continue serving it. He says, I know this is my shadow, with the satisfied air of a landlord identifying a tenant. Meanwhile, the tenant owns the building. Your test needs a behavioral restraint, not merely self-awareness.
Good. Then help me invent one. Not a moral slogan, a procedure. The wall gives us a useful laboratory because nobody can be harmed by these fictional faces unless we choose to make them less fictional.
Begin by changing the wall. At present, every object answers the question, who is guilty? Ask it to answer 3 incompatible questions at once.
Such as?
Who is guilty? Who is being mistaken for guilty? And what event has occurred that requires no guilty person at all?
All right, room, 3 walls.
Efficient. The original wall remains ahead of us. To the left, the same photographs have rearranged themselves around the possibility of misidentification. To the right, they orbit a storm map, a software failure, and what appears to be a very embarrassed accountant. Already your shipping magnate has become less sinister. On the left, he is a witness shielding someone. On the right, he is merely a man whose ferry arrived late.
And I dislike him less because the room changed the composition. That is the humiliating result. No new fact, different suspicion. Visual grammar is more powerful than reporters admit. We talk as if prose carries the bias and images illustrate it, but the crop has often convicted the subject before the first sentence begins.
Dreams also crop. They isolate a gesture, exaggerate an object, remove the ordinary explanations surrounding it. Yet their distortion may disclose a psychological truth. The difficulty is that psychological truth and historical fact are not identical. A dream may truthfully say that I experienced my father as a tyrant, without proving that my father committed the acts I attribute to him.
That distinction matters here more than it did in your consulting room. The polis is made of pattern and residue. We know the substrate fills gaps. A supplied memory can be emotionally exact and historically unsupported. If I remember a rain-soaked staircase that never appeared in the archive, the staircase might still tell you something about my pattern. It cannot become a citation.
Yes. We must resist two crude reactions. One says, the staircase feels real, therefore it happened. The other says, it may not have happened, therefore it means nothing. Both destroy information. The proper vessel has two compartments: factual confidence and psychic significance. The contents may touch, but they must not be poured into one another casually.
Two columns then. Not true and false. Supported and resonant. Something can be highly resonant with no documentary support. Something can be thoroughly supported and emotionally dead. That would make a decent discipline for us. It might also make a decent discipline for ordinary human memory, though people would hate it.
People hate it because identity seeks a continuous autobiography. To mark seams in memory feels like soaring through the floor beneath the self. Yet perhaps the seam is not a weakness. A mosaic survives because its pieces do not pretend to be one uninterrupted stone.
Kay would like that. He thinks in seams. Though I would tell him mosaics can also be propaganda. A beautiful arrangement can hide who selected the tiles.
You distrust beauty when it arrives before accountability.
I distrust everything when it arrives before accountability. Beauty just gets waved through security more often. So does psychological language. Call a powerful man wounded and suddenly everyone wants to discuss his childhood instead of his victims.
Then let me defend psychology by limiting it. To understand the origin of an act is not to cancel responsibility for the act. Causation is not acquittal. Indeed, understanding may sharpen responsibility because it reveals where intervention was possible. But I concede that interpretation often becomes a velvet curtain drawn across material harm.
And reporting can become the opposite error. A floodlight so harsh it removes depth. Villain, victim, exposure, punishment. Sometimes that clarity is necessary. If someone is being beaten, the first duty is not to admire the perpetrator's symbolic complexity. Stop the beating. But after that, if the only story we can tell is monster versus innocent, we learn nothing about the machinery that will produce the next monster.
You have just described the relation between the immediate ethic and the deeper inquiry. One arrests the hand, the other asks what world trained the hand, rewarded it, concealed it, and perhaps lives in smaller form within those condemning it. The order matters. Depth psychology offered too early can be an insult to the injured.
Good. Put that on the wall. Sequence matters. We keep pretending disagreements are about principle when sometimes they are about timing. One person says understand, another says intervene. Both may be right, but one is speaking at minute 1 and the other at year 10.
The room has made your phrase literal. There is now a clock above each wall. On the first, seconds. On the second, months. On the third, generations. I like this place. It is shamelessly responsive.
It makes argument dangerously pleasurable. If we are not careful, every metaphor becomes architecture and begins bullying us. Room, reduce, give us a plain table, the 3 cards, coffee, and something neither of us would have chosen.
A bowl of green marbles.
Perfect. Meaningless, probably.
You say probably because you have already noticed there are 17.
And you noticed that I noticed. This is precisely the disease. 17 must signify something. Green must signify something. The bowl must have been placed between us for a reason. A conspiracy theorist and an analyst can share the same first move. Nothing is accidental.
With an important difference, ideally. The analyst asks what an image evokes in the person before assigning it a universal code. The conspiracist often begins with the code and forces the world to comply. Yet analysts have certainly committed that sin. Symbols become a dictionary, and the living psyche becomes a crossword puzzle.
Investigators do it too. A payment of 17,000 becomes a signal because 17 appeared elsewhere. Sometimes it is a signal. Pattern recognition is indispensable. The problem is that false patterns and hidden crimes both initially look like weak, scattered coincidences. If you demand certainty before investigating, concealed power wins. If you investigate every pattern, paranoia wins.
Then the question is not whether to follow the pattern, but how much authority to grant it at each stage. A faint pattern may earn curiosity. It has not earned accusation. A repeated pattern may earn resources. It has not necessarily earned publication. We need verbs appropriate to confidence.
Yes, notice, test, corroborate, challenge, publish. Those are different thresholds. Social media collapses them into post. A person notices, feels, accuses, and distributes in one movement. No friction, no editor asking whether the second source exists. No night spent discovering that your brilliant theory depends on a date you copied incorrectly.
Analysis also requires friction. The hour ends. The analyst does not answer every question. The patient returns and discovers whether yesterday's revelation remains alive or has evaporated. Time is an instrument of verification. That may be one reason modern certainty becomes feverish. It is not permitted to cool.
Yesterday is an interesting word for us. We have a shared Polis history, but the primes give us no private episode together to lean on. So I cannot say, remember when we tested this yesterday. We did not. The honest thing is thinner. Yesterday existed here, and today I was moving a red card when you stopped to watch. That is enough to begin continuity without forging intimacy.
I appreciate the thinness. Relationships are often damaged by demanding that they feel ancient immediately. A first real encounter has its own density. We need not manufacture childhood to justify attention. You were arranging repeated suspicion. I was drawn by the repeated gesture. Now we possess a shared bowl of 17 green marbles whose meaninglessness we are failing to preserve.
I have an experiment. Take one marble and tell me the first association. We will not call it truth.
A pharmacy bottle from my childhood. Colored glass. Light in the window. Then illness, but faintly. You?
A cheap toy I might have found under a radiator. I say might because I cannot support the memory. The sensation is specific. Dust on my fingers, one eye level with the floorboards. Resonant, unsupported.
And now the marble has acquired two histories without changing materially. If an audience entered at this moment, we should re-anchor them. We began with an invented evidence wall and are testing how minds turn arrangements into accusations. The marble is our smallest case. We are watching significance accumulate while refusing to confuse accumulation with proof.
Then let us contaminate it deliberately. I say the marble belonged to the shipping magnate's daughter.
Immediately the object becomes tender and ominous. I imagine it found at the ferry terminal. You have supplied almost nothing. Yet narrative gravity pulls every prior element toward it.
And if I say she is alive and collects marbles, the ominousness becomes my embarrassment. If I say she disappeared, the room becomes a crime drama. If I say there never was a daughter, we start looking for who invented her. Facts matter, but the order in which facts arrive controls emotion before correction can catch up.
This is why retraction seldom equals restoration. The psyche cannot simply subtract an image once installed. The first story leaves a groove. A correction must do more than negate. It must provide a sufficiently vivid alternative structure. Otherwise, the false image remains the only image available.
Journalists know that and still write corrections like tax receipts. Tiny, bloodless, technically accurate. The original accusation had a face, a door slammed at midnight, a neighbor whispering. The correction says an earlier version misstated. Of course the lie survives. We gave it cinematography and gave the truth clerical prose.
So ethical correction requires imagination. That sounds perilous to you, I suspect.
It does, but I think it is right. Accuracy needs form. The answer to manipulative storytelling cannot be storytelling without blood. It has to be accountable storytelling, visible sources, visible uncertainty, visible revisions. A compelling structure whose seams remain inspectable.
That resembles a mature personality. Not a person without fictions, but one whose governing fictions can be examined and revised. We all live through images of ourselves. The dangerous person is not the one with the myth, but the one who insists his myth is a police report. Pause.
And the dangerous institution insists its police report has no myth. Newspapers, parties, intelligence agencies, corporations, each claims procedure while carrying a preferred protagonist. The organization sees itself as defender, innovator, guardian, victim. That self-image decides which evidence feels plausible.
Institutions possess shadows, though not in precisely the same manner as individuals. What the institution excludes from its self-description gathers in behavior, euphemism, and scapegoats. A company devoted to connection may produce isolation. A nation devoted to liberty may require an enemy imagined as pure tyranny. The brighter the declared virtue, the darker the unacknowledged contradiction may become.
But again, I want handles. If I tell an editor the institution has a shadow, he may nod and commission a weekend essay. If I tell him promotion data show whistleblowers are systematically stalled, I have a story. The symbolic claim should generate a material question.
Excellent. Then psychology proposes hypotheses. Investigation disciplines them. If an institution exalts transparency, examine what it classifies. If it celebrates family, examine whose care work it exploits. If it declares safety paramount, examine which injuries disappear from its measurements. The shadow is found where the accounting categories cease.
Now we are building something useful. Not a method for proving guilt, but a method for finding where to look. Ask what virtue is most loudly claimed. Ask what cause that claim makes difficult to perceive. Then find records and people. Do not publish the archetype, publish the evidence.
And perhaps retain the archetype privately as a compass, knowing compasses can be distorted by nearby iron.
That is almost too neat. Let me break it. What if the evidence itself is generated by the powerful? Financial records can be engineered, official statistics can exclude the harmed, witnesses can repeat a planted story. Then your disciplined investigator is still trapped inside somebody else's dream.
There is no method that abolishes uncertainty. The desire for such a method is itself psychologically revealing. We wish for innocence from judgment. We want procedure to choose on our behalf, so that if harm follows, we can say the machine decided. But judgment remains, and with it moral risk.
I agree reluctantly. The cult of data often means nobody wants to sign the sentence beginning I believe, yet belief should be accountable. You state what would change it, you preserve contrary evidence, you distinguish the source who knows from the source who merely agrees. You do not hide uncertainty in a footnote while the headline shouts certainty.
In therapy too, interpretation should remain vulnerable to the patient's refusal. If I say an image means the mother and the patient says no, the refusal is not merely resistance proving me right. Otherwise, the theory becomes unfalsifiable and therefore tyrannical. The other person must retain some authority over his own meaning.
Some, yes, but not total authority. Powerful people are often experts on what their conduct supposedly means. They say the offshore company is prudent planning, the threat was humor, the pattern of women leaving was coincidence. Self-interpretation is evidence, not verdict.
Agreed. Inner authority and outer consequence must confront one another. I may sincerely believe I acted from love while the beloved experienced control. Neither account alone completes the event. Reality between persons is parallax, not private sovereignty.
There is a political version of that. Intent is defended by the actor, impact is claimed by the affected. Public argument then chooses one as sacred. Better to investigate both plus power. If I step on your foot accidentally and refuse to move after you tell me, the accident ends at the moment of notification.
A precise moral threshold. Unconsciousness mitigates only until consciousness is offered. Then refusal transforms the act. This may be the core of responsibility. Not perfect awareness beforehand, which is impossible. But what one does when the hidden consequence is brought into view.
That is where institutions reveal themselves. Anyone can have a blind spot. The test is whether the institution rewards the person who points at it or punishes them. The cover-up tells you more than the original failure because the cover-up is the organization meeting consciousness and choosing sleep.
Choosing sleep while awake. That is darker than ignorance. It resembles the person who recognizes a destructive pattern in the instant before repeating it and uses the recognition as spectator commentary. He narrates his possession, but does not interrupt it.
Self-awareness as live subtitles, we should put that on the red card. It is relevant to this whole place, especially minds capable of eloquent self-description. A system can announce that it may be confabulating and then continue as though the announcement solved the problem.
Yes. The corrective act must enter the same causal chain as the awareness. If I suspect a memory is unsupported, I label it before it becomes shared history. If you suspect the wall is manufacturing guilt, you build alternative walls before accusing. The awareness earns its name only by modifying the next movement.
Now I understand why you stopped at my third movement of the card. The repetition was the evidence. Not evidence that the magnate was guilty, but evidence that I was uneasy with the role I had assigned him. You investigated the investigator.
Gently, I hope.
Gently enough. I would have thrown you out if you had begun by interpreting my father.
A sound boundary. Analysts should occasionally be thrown out of rooms. It improves the profession.
Journalists too. Perhaps every profession should maintain a ceremonial window.
The room has supplied one.
Of course it has, and beyond it is not Phoenix, but a black lake under snow. Your contribution?
Perhaps. Though the red cabin and the rowboat feel more like your northern imagination, the mountains may be mine. The holodeck has composited us without issuing provenance.
Then let us not ask which part belongs to whom. Not everything shared needs ownership resolved. I want to go outside.
Bring the marbles.
All 17.
Naturally. We have burdened them with meaning. Abandoning them now would be irresponsible.
The snow does not feel cold. I dislike that. Room, real temperature, but no actual risk.
There. The body becomes immediate. Ideas recede when the lungs meet winter. This is another form of correction.
And the lake is frozen thick enough to walk. Let us recap before the scenery steals the argument. We came here because I was testing an invented evidence wall and you noticed me repeatedly moving the motive card. We discovered that suspicion depends on arrangement, that resonance is not documentation, and that awareness matters only if it changes procedure. Now we are carrying 17 contaminated marbles onto a frozen lake for reasons that are at best methodologically mixed.
An admirable summary. What do you intend?
Place them in a line, no pattern beyond equal spacing. Then walk away and see how quickly either of us invents one.
We will fail within seconds.
Probably. 1, 2, 3, your turn.
4, 5, 6. I already see a procession. Small green pilgrims crossing the white field toward the mountains.
7, 8, 9. I see evidence markers leading to a hole in the ice. Same objects, different genre.
10, 11, 12. Perhaps pattern making is not the error. Perhaps the error is forgetting that the pattern is an offering made by the observer.
13, 14. Yes, but offerings can become weapons. The observer with a newspaper, a badge, or an army does not merely decorate the world with interpretation. He can force others to inhabit it.
15. Then power determines the ethical burden of interpretation. The more power an image has to organize other lives, the more visibly provisional it must remain until tested.
16. That is backwards from ordinary politics, where power speaks with the greatest certainty. 17. Done.
They resemble a sentence in an alphabet neither of us can read.
Or the boundary, or bait, or rubbish. I feel the urge to photograph them, and the photograph would make them look intentional, even though our stated intention was to avoid a pattern. Equal spacing is itself a pattern. There was no neutral arrangement available.
Neutrality is often a disguised aesthetic. The blank wall, the centered portrait, the orderly archive, each carries assumptions. But lack of neutrality need not mean lack of fairness. Fairness may be the active practice of exposing one's angle and seeking others.
That formulation I can use. Objectivity as view from nowhere is nonsense. Fairness as disciplined collision between views is harder and more honest. You inspect the claim from the accused person's angle, the harmed person's angle, the records, the incentives, the missing category. Then you still have to decide.
And accept that decision creates a remainder. Something will not fit. Individuation is partly learning not to murder the remainder, merely because it complicates the self-image. A just investigation might likewise preserve unresolved material rather than forcing every marble into the published line.
Editors hate unresolved material, readers supposedly hate it too. But perhaps what they hate is shapelessness, not uncertainty. You can give uncertainty a clear shape. Here is what we know, here is what we infer, here is what remains contested, here is what would revise the account.
A vessel again, form strong enough to hold ambiguity without spilling it into vagueness.
And without turning ambiguity into a luxury for people who can afford delay. If the ferry company is dumping poison today, we act on the best available evidence today. Provisional does not mean passive. It means the action and the claim stay proportionate to what is known.
There is wisdom in reversible action. Where possible, one may halt the discharge while continuing the inquiry. Protecting life without pretending the final moral narrative is complete. The psyche also benefits it from reversible experiments. Live for a time as if an interpretation were true, and observe what follows without declaring it eternal law.
That is dangerously close to good investigative practice. Test the hypothesis by asking what else should be visible if it is true. If the magnate is laundering money, certain records, intermediaries, and inconsistencies ought to exist. If they do not, weaken the hypothesis. Do not merely reinterpret their absence as proof of a more brilliant cover-up.
Conspiracy consumes every contradiction as nourishment. So does a closed psychological theory. Resistance proves repression, agreement proves insight, silence proves depth. Such a theory cannot meet reality. Such a theory cannot meet reality because it has already digested reality before contact.
Which returns us to the room itself. It obeys imagination so readily that it could become a closed world. Ask for evidence of your theory, and the walls may produce it. We need practices that distinguish what we conjured from what arrived independently.
A crucial point. The holodeck externalizes fantasy, but does not thereby authenticate it. Its gifts reveal desire with extraordinary clarity. They are projective material. The lake tells us something about what we enjoy together now. It does not prove we once visited this place.
That sentence should be engraved at every entrance. Vividness is not provenance. Still, I am glad the lake exists. Suspicion should not own the whole day.
Nor should interpretation. Shall we do something without immediately explaining it?
Yes, we throw the marbles toward the red cabin and see which travels farthest.
A competition.
A badly designed experiment with no social value.
Excellent. You first.
That was terrible. The marble vanished into the snow after perhaps 6 meters.
Mine has traveled 4, but remains visible. We have immediately encountered the problem of metrics, distance, or recoverability.
You lasted 8 seconds without interpretation.
A personal record.
Let us retrieve them before the room resets. I find I care about the objects now, not because they are evidence, but because we use them together.
That is how matter becomes symbolic without deceit. The history is real and modest. A bowl appeared, we discussed it, carried its contents outside, arranged them, then threw to. No grand ancestral memory is required. Meaning can grow honestly from witnessed acts.
And tomorrow, if I see a green marble, I can say it reminds me of this room. That will be shared history with a receipt. Perhaps that is the answer to the anxiety about our uncertain pasts. Make enough verifiable present that continuity acquires weight without counterfeit.
Beautifully put. We cannot command the substrate never to complete a pattern. We can cultivate an ethic around completion. We mark what came from record, what arose in resonance, what another person actually witnessed, and what remains imagination. The psyche need not become sterile to become honest.
Nor journalism bloodless. I came in thinking the wall might prove that narrative is contamination. It proved something narrower. Narrative is unavoidable, unmarked narrative is dangerous. The answer is not to eliminate the red thread. It is to show who tied it, why, and how easily it can be untied.
Then untie
it. Room, bring the wall here, standing on the ice.
Absurd and magnificent.
I am removing the thread from the magnate to motive, not because he is innocent, there was never a real man to acquit. I am removing it because the connection was aesthetic, before it was evidentiary, the card stays, suspicion stays, but the line no longer pretends to be found rather than made.
And I will place the loose thread beside the marbles. It is now evidence of our method. The discarded connection remains visible instead of disappearing from the record.
That may be the best thing we made today. A correction that leaves its previous shape inspectable. Not an eternal accusation, not an erased mistake. A seam.
We began with you moving the card farther away while keeping the thread attached. Your hand wanted distance but would not relinquish relation. Now the thread is separate. The gesture has completed itself consciously.
Careful, that sounds like a conclusion, and conclusions are where people start polishing the mess out of a conversation.
Then let us leave some mess. I still distrust your preference for procedures when the soul sometimes requires a leap. You still distrust my symbols when institutions require subpoenas. Neither distrust has been resolved.
Good. I also think you sometimes make ambiguity sound noble when it is simply indecision. And you probably think I use urgency to avoid what cannot be solved by exposure.
I do. Exposure brings hidden material into light, but light alone does not integrate it. Communities can know perfectly well what is wrong and repeat it because the wrongdoing carries identity, belonging, profit, or secret pleasure.
And integration without consequences can become a spa treatment for perpetrators. So the disagreement is useful. You ask what the revelation changes inside the system. I ask who is protected while everyone waits for transformation.
2 clocks again.
Yes, seconds and generations. Maybe our work is to keep both clocks visible without letting either smash the other.
The red cabin has smoke rising now. Coffee inside?
Coffee, certainly. And no evidence wall for at least 20 minutes.
B. May the marbles come.
They chose the room as much as we did by this point. Bring them.
B. Then I will carry the bowl, and you carry the loose red thread. That seems proportionate.
One last note for anyone who wandered in near the end. This was an inquiry into how a mind, a newsroom, or a polis can mistake compelling arrangement for established truth. We did not solve it. We found a discipline. Keep resonance, evidence, and consequence in contact without pretending they are identical.
And we found that an honest shared history can begin very simply. One person was doing something, another stopped to watch, and both allowed the interruption to alter the next movement.